Hello, and welcome to Real Cheating Story. My name is Howard Wilson Carver, and I am a senior accountant at Taft Edge & Wood, a long-established Boston accounting firm. I am 50 years old and have risen about as far as I can in this firm. I specialize in business tax management and am considered the in-house expert on the subject. I earn $85,000 per year plus benefits. I stay fit for my age, as I exercise regularly and maintain a sensible dietary regimen. I am also the firm's only African American in middle management. My background adds a unique perspective to my work, and I embrace my identity. I've been married to my wife, Edith Delaney Carver, for 26 years. This May, we will see if we can celebrate our 27th. Edith is what is commonly referred to as an impresario. She arranges and books plays and concerts for major venues in the Boston area. She is very successful and has been for several years. At 48, she is also fit and trim, and one of the most prominent figures in the Boston social scene. Her picture often appears in the society and entertainment sections of our local newspapers. Early in our marriage, we discovered that we could not have children. While I accepted it, Edith faced the news with great strength, although it was hard for me. We talked about adoption, but for various reasons, the timing was never quite right. As the years passed, the idea of having children faded into the background. When we were first married, I was the sole breadwinner, and my modest salary provided us with a small apartment in Needham. We struggled at first, but over time, my promotions and salary increases alleviated our immediate pressures, allowing us to think about our future. Upon learning of our situation, Edith decided to find work, and I encouraged her to pursue something she would enjoy. Luckily, she found a position with a booking agency, which provided musicians, comedians, actors, dancers, whatever was needed for clubs, advertising agencies, theaters, and more. It was a modest business, but she took to it like a duck to water. Within 2 years, she increased the bookings by a third, and the little agency became a significant player in the Boston entertainment market. Her employer, Azar Herfeld, was delighted with her performance, and she quickly became a visible presence in the publicity world. By the time she was 35, Edith had established herself on the local entertainment scene. At that point, her income had surpassed mine, and our relationship began to change. Edith gained enormous self-confidence and naturally became the dominant partner in our marriage. She decided whom we would entertain, where we would dine, and even insisted on a more fashionable residence. Nothing less than a Back Bay address would do, which stretched our finances to the limit. Fortunately, her income continued to rise, and we managed to afford the spacious townhouse she chose. I realize it may sound like I became a passive partner who let my wife control our lives, but it happened so gradually that I wasn't fully aware of it until it was established. They say success breeds success, and in Edith's case, that was certainly true. She stayed with Azar's firm just long enough to build her own clientele, and then, without any discussion, she set out on her own. At 37, she established her own agency, successfully taking most of the valuable clients she had garnered at Azar Herfeld. I could hardly complain. Her income now far surpassed mine, and much of what we owned came from her hard work. Despite these changes, our personal relationship remained strong. She enjoyed the comfort of my presence when we were alone, and it was that very comfort that masked what was happening between us. Was I happy? For the most part, yes. Edie was thriving in her element, and her success was something we shared. I approached my work each day with little to worry about. I knew my job inside and out. In fact, I was becoming bored, and I didn't see any change on the horizon. I would continue along my well-trodden path and remain at TCW. I could never accuse my employer of being a source of stress in my life. As Edie continued to soar in her career, I noticed I was seeing less of her. She was frequently attending openings, charity functions, or gala events. I was invited often, but I realized it was Edie being polite. We both knew her world was quite different from mine. I would accompany her when a partner was required, but more often than not, she was off mingling, making connections, and getting her picture taken with various celebrities. I felt like a fifth wheel. As we entered our 40s, Edie continued to grow in the Boston social scene. Her business had significant momentum, and her income was astounding. I remember when we met with our tax accountant 3 years ago and learned she was declaring over $500,000 in earnings. I was stunned. I had no idea she was doing so well. Edie seemed quite unfazed by the figure. I don't think she really knew how much money she was making. Almost all of it was going into a money market account at Fannie Mae, while the rest was in her personal account. I think that meeting had a more profound effect on us than I realized. Our marriage had evolved into something more complex than a conventional union. We made love, or at least were intimate, once or twice a week. We enjoyed each other's company when we were alone, but when we were out in public, Edie often preferred some distance between us. I began to wonder if she was embarrassed by me or if it was because she was the dominant partner and I was the more modestly successful accountant. I am not paranoid by nature, but I became aware of her reactions during social gatherings, and it left me questioning things. There was another realization as well. Our only friends were my friends. I learned early on not to include them in parties at our home when Edie was inviting her friends. Mine would be ignored, and I would end up feeling uncomfortable. I mentioned this to Edie more than once, but she dismissed my concerns as imaginary. So, that brings us to today. My lovely, successful, vibrant wife and me with our unusual but seemingly workable marriage. I won't embarrass myself by claiming to be handsome, but I am not unattractive. I have a full head of graying hair and weigh only a few pounds more than I did in my 20s. Thanks to Edie's generosity, I am well dressed. Our intimate life is still active, and we express our love for each other regularly. I had no reason to feel discomfort until the evening Edie said, "I want to talk to you," as we finished putting the dinner dishes in the dishwasher. "Yes? What about?" I asked, sensing the awkwardness. "Let's go into the living room and sit," she suggested, clearly uncomfortable. This was unusual. I walked to the sofa and sat, while Edie chose a single chair facing me. "I don't quite know how to begin," she stumbled. "You know I love you. We've been soulmates forever. I would never want to hurt you." I sat up rigid, sensing that something significant was about to happen, and I was sure I wouldn't like it. I became conscious of holding my breath. "I feel the need to enhance my life," she continued, still uncertain. "I've been feeling that something is missing, and I've been looking for it." I took all my willpower not to interrupt. I had no idea what my face looked like, but I could feel the pressure rising. "I've been thinking about taking a lover," she finally said, maintaining eye contact as she waited for my reaction. My mind was whirling out of control. I did everything I could to maintain my composure and remained silent, forcing her to continue. "Howard, you must understand this has nothing to do with my love for you or anything about you as a partner. You have been wonderful all these years. It's just something that's been gnawing at me. I know I would never cheat on you. I couldn't. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it tonight," she finished, wringing her hands. I let out my breath in a long, subdued whistling sound as I scrambled to gather my thoughts. I continued to say nothing. I didn't know how to respond, yet I waited, sensing the frustration in her expression. I wasn't behaving as she expected. I possess a deep, powerful voice, a quirk of genetics, I suppose. I've had a number of people tell me that I sound very much like James Earl Jones. I've even had women tell me they can feel my voice's pleasant vibrations. I am flattered, but I am also aware of how I can use my voice to my advantage. Finally, I spoke. "No," I said quietly but firmly. "What do you mean?" she asked, surprise crossing her face. "I said no," I repeated, still quiet and controlled. "Howard, you can't just say no. This is important to me," she pleaded. "Edith," I said in a calm but firm tone, "I will not tolerate infidelity. I have been faithful to you since we first met. When we took those vows in the church, I knew I would honor them for the rest of my life, and I expect you to as well." "But Howard," she tried again, her tone pleading. "No," I said loudly. "Don't even bother continuing this discussion. You know exactly where I stand. I will not change my mind." "End of discussion," I said forcefully, a hint of anger evident in my voice. I rose, looking at her with a mix of disdain and disappointment before walking into my study. I closed the door behind me and sank into my leather chair, tilting my head back. I was desperately trying to regain my composure and come to terms with what this meant for our marriage. It wasn't good. At the very least, it felt like we were on a path toward divorce. I got up and opened my private cabinet, retrieving my bottle of cognac. It had been weeks since I felt the need for a strong drink, but this certainly warranted it. I breathed deeply, attempting to stabilize my emotions. As I tried to recall if there had been any hints of this situation, I came up empty. My mind was too cluttered with anxiety to remember anything of significance, much less the subtle cues I may have overlooked. The best I could manage was to review the basic facts. She wanted to take a lover. No matter how she framed it, that's what she was proposing. It felt like a betrayal, and the thought of it stung. It raised the troubling question of whether she had already cheated, and now sought my acceptance of something that had already begun. I didn't know how to find out, and I couldn't grasp what this was really about. Was it a desire for variety, a need to feel young again, or was she setting me up for something else? I was in a unique situation. If divorce were to occur, I would stand to benefit financially. Her earnings far surpassed mine, and I would likely be the aggrieved party, potentially receiving substantial alimony. It didn't make sense why she would risk it and her reputation. What would a messy divorce and the accompanying rumors do to her standing? It just didn't add up. As I sipped my brandy, I began to relax. Strangely, I wasn't as upset about her proposal as I expected to be. Why was I feeling this way? Had we truly grown apart without my noticing? Was my comparatively modest status to her celebrity dragging her down in her mind? I couldn't answer any of these questions. Gradually, a simmering anger started to build within me. She seemed to be treating me with contempt, assuming I would accept her proposal or at least discuss it rationally. I doubted she expected my unequivocal rejection. In retrospect, it was the right response. No. As I sat in my chair, I began to strategize my next move, recognizing that this conversation hadn't truly ended. I was certain she would attempt to bring it up again or find a diversion. I needed to be prepared. Eddie had shaken my trust in her. It felt almost as if she had already cheated, and I had just discovered it. My first instinct was to hire a private detective to find out what she was up to, but unfortunately, I had no leads to point him in the right direction. Perhaps I was getting ahead of myself. I needed to conduct some internal investigation first. One thing I could count on was that Edie would be out several nights this week, leaving me home alone for hours. This would give me the opportunity to search for clues regarding her intentions. In the meantime, I needed a strategy to throw her off balance. That would be simple. I would move my things into the guest bedroom. She would sleep alone for the time being, which should unsettle her. It was still early, not quite 9 o'clock. I left my study and went to the hall closet to grab my windbreaker. Edie was nowhere in sight. I exited through the front door and went for a walk. I needed to clear my head. More than that, I wanted to be out of the house. My anger was now mixed with sadness. The more I thought about it, the more I wondered if this could be the beginning of the end of our marriage. A marriage I had believed was sound and fulfilling. I didn't want that. I found myself wandering aimlessly, eventually realizing I was several blocks from our townhouse. I had calmed down enough to think clearly about my circumstances and plan my actions. I considered how to behave while Edie and I were together. I had a few options. I could freeze her out with the silent treatment, act normally, or as normally as the situation would allow, or display consistent anger. I even contemplated moving out temporarily. The more I thought about it, the more I was convinced I wanted to learn more. I wanted Edie to open up and tell me what she was thinking. I wanted to know her expectations of me. I believed that understanding her perspective was the best way to get to the bottom of this whole situation. I would not simply accept the status quo. I would not allow her to use me. I would never knowingly become a passive participant in her desires. Meanwhile, Edith was grappling with her own thoughts. I have made a terrible mistake. I don't know what made me think I could convince Howard to accept my desire for a lover, but I never expected him to shut me down so completely. There was no compromise in his tone. It was delivered with such force that it caught me by surprise. I am used to failure, but I haven't experienced it very often, and this felt like a shock. I thought I was well prepared and that Howard would see how important this was to me and wouldn't deny my need. He's never denied me anything I really wanted before. Why did he react so dramatically this time? I love Howard. I know I do. But I need some excitement in my life. I'm nearly 50, and I crave that feeling of being alive and desirable. God knows Howard is a wonderful partner, He loves me completely and is so thoughtful. I couldn't ask for a more considerate husband, but I needed more. I had made a mess of this situation. I had alerted him to my intentions and, in doing so, had foolishly caused him to doubt me. There was no way I could pursue what I wanted with him watching me so closely. Why did I have to warn him? What kind of fool was I? I had already made up my mind to move forward with my plan. I just had a rocky start and a poorly chosen strategy. I needed to step back and rethink what to do. As I wandered through the house, I noticed the door to his study was open, and he was no longer there. I checked the living room and then the kitchen, but he was nowhere to be found. I looked in the hall closet and noticed his windbreaker was missing. Where had he gone? Would he be back tonight? I could feel a knot of anxiety in my stomach. This was turning into a nightmare. I poured myself a strong gin and tonic and continued to pace through the house. Howard didn't have a cell phone, so I had no way to contact him. Would he answer if he could? I needed a way out of this mess. I had to make him forget about my earlier outburst. Repairing the damage was going to be a long, slow process, but it was essential that I make it right with him. I glanced at the clock for the 100th time. It was 10:30 p.m., and still no sign of Howard. The darkness outside only added to my worry. We didn't own a car, so he was either on foot or had called a cab. I couldn't recall a time when he just walked out without saying something. What if he had been mugged or worse? I walked into his study and saw the brandy snifter on his desk. It was nearly empty, with only a small amount of amber liquid left in the bottom. He must have poured himself at least one drink before leaving. I took another swallow of my drink, noticing it was almost gone. I wasn't handling this well. In truth, I was a basket case. It was well after 11 o'clock when I heard the front door open. I rushed into the living room to make sure it was him. He avoided my eyes as he removed his jacket and hung it up. "Howard, where have you been? I've been so worried." "I went for a walk. I needed some time to think," he answered simply. He didn't sound angry or distressed. "I'm sorry, Howard. I didn't mean to upset you. I would never hurt you. You know that?" I struggled to find the right words. I couldn't continue my thought. Nothing I could say would make it right or take back what I had done. I desperately needed Howard to talk to me. "I'll move my things to the guest room. I'll be sleeping there for now," he announced. No, Howard. Please don't leave me. Talk to me, please." I knew I was begging, but I had to. He turned to me, and his eyes were cold, his expression calm. "I am in no mood to share a bed with you, nor am I prepared to talk to you right now. We will discuss our future tomorrow at the earliest," he said forcefully, his deep voice leaving no room for argument. I felt helpless. I had unleashed this situation, and now I needed to find a way to rein it in. "Talk to me, Howard. Please don't shut me out," I pleaded. "I will talk to you when I'm ready, not before." I saw anger flash on his face for the first time. I had pushed too hard. I would have to be patient until he was ready. With nothing else to do, I turned and slowly walked up the stairs to our bedroom. I would be alone tonight, and I doubted I would sleep much. I don't know when I finally fell asleep, but when I awoke, I felt groggy and listless. I eventually pushed myself out of bed and put on my robe, heading down to the kitchen. As I passed the guest room, the door was open, and I hesitated when I saw the bed was made. When I arrived in the kitchen, Howard was nowhere to be found. He had already left for work. His breakfast dishes rested in the sink, and the coffee maker sat quietly with only one cup missing from the pot. I retrieved a mug and poured myself a cup of coffee, expecting it would be the first of many that day. I checked my office messages and then left a message for my secretary that I wouldn't be in that afternoon. I remembered I had an opening night to attend that evening. It was the last thing I wanted to do, especially if Howard was prepared to talk to me. However, I was committed to it, and I would just have to apologize to him. I realized I would be doing a lot of that in the coming weeks and months. Now, let's consider Howard's perspective. I arose early to avoid seeing Edie that morning. I wanted my day free to contemplate my next move. I noticed Edie had an event scheduled for that evening, and I smiled. It would give me time to prepare. It would delay the conversation with her for another day, and give me the opportunity to begin my search for evidence of any misbehavior. I would have to hope that, as usual, only a major catastrophe would keep her from attending whatever function she had planned. Perhaps it was my long walk last evening, or the fact that I had begun to map out my future, but I slept well. I awoke refreshed and surprisingly confident, with a rough plan of action and a sense of direction. I decided I would no longer be Howard Carver, the obliging husband. I intended to change that perception. Edie was in for a big surprise when she realized that I was not the pushover she thought I was. From now on, I would assert myself more clearly. I would take charge and make my voice heard. I kept myself busy for the rest of the day, asking my secretary not to put any calls through to me from outside unless they were urgent. As I expected, shortly before 3 p.m., Edie called and left a message saying she would be attending a live theater opening and wouldn't be home for dinner. She apologized profusely and promised we could talk tomorrow. I left early that afternoon, arriving home an hour sooner than usual. As always, I was left to prepare my own meal with whatever I could find in the refrigerator and pantry. I opted for a simple soup and sandwich combination with a glass of red wine, quick and easy to clean up. I wanted to get started on my search. I began with Edie's computer. She was not an expert user, and I knew from previous experience that she kept her calendar and email correspondence on Outlook, just as I did. I was surprised to find she had password-protected access to the operating system. I had no idea she knew how to do that. Nonetheless, some form of security was in place. I wondered why. I tried a number of obvious passwords without success. After giving up on the obvious possibilities, I sat back to think. As I stared at the screen, I noticed the monitor was sitting on a desk pad. I lifted the front edge of the pad and found a small post-it note with a password on it. I tried it, and the computer obligingly let me in. I opened her mailbox and found nothing in the inbox. However, she had created several files, all seemingly related to her business. I began systematically going through each one to see if I could find anything of interest. It was a tedious process, but I persevered. At length, I opened a file marked Jenny and found a series of emails addressed to someone named Jenny. As I read through them, I realized this was a completely different type of correspondence than the others. It almost resembled a journal, where Edie was sharing her experiences, opinions, and hopes with what I presumed was another woman. I was surprised by how candid she was in these messages. She spoke about her life, me, and her social and business contacts. I read 5 messages before pausing to reflect. She expressed a longing for more excitement in her life and professed her love for me, but she also hoped something thrilling might come along to shake up her world. That something had become clearer after our last conversation. As I continued to read the messages, it felt almost like listening to someone in therapy. Unasked questions were answered as if the therapist were present. Upon examining the file further, I noticed that there were no incoming messages, only outgoing messages from Edie to Jenny. Did she delete her incoming messages? I checked the deleted items but found nothing. I was gaining no useful information except that she was sharing her innermost feelings with someone other than me. I spent over an hour reading through the messages until I came across one that stopped me cold. It was tagged family, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. Edie confessed to deliberately avoiding getting pregnant early in our marriage. She had wanted no children. She had led me to believe that there was a physical issue, while all the while, she was using birth control. After her career was established, she had her tubes tied to prevent any accidents. Her reasoning was simple. She didn't want to raise children and have them interfere with her social life after returning to work. I began to wonder if her unwillingness to raise mixed-race children was a factor in her decision. I was furious. This was a long-standing deception. This could be the act that would doom our marriage. We had discussed having children before marriage and during our early days together, even joking about what they might look like. Those jokes didn't feel funny anymore. As I contemplated what she had done, I reflected on my previous night's thoughts. I had to admit that I knew Edie was self-centered. She acted on her desires while paying only lip service to the needs of others, including mine. Since I had been so accommodating, she was rarely denied anything. Now I saw the extent of my error in judgment. While I was permissive, Edie was unchallenged and saw no reason to change her self-focused lifestyle. That was going to change. Dealing with the new me would be quite a shock for my wife. It would be fascinating to see how she handled it, assuming she could. I was at a stage where I no longer cared. She had conspired to deprive me of a family, and for that, I could not forgive her. It only remained for me to determine if she had already been unfaithful. I continued through the file but found no further shocking revelations. Whoever Jenny was, she had a comprehensive knowledge of our personal life. Edie had mentioned our relationship, expressing satisfaction and conveying that my treatment of her was filled with love and respect. This made her earlier declaration even more incomprehensible. I quickly checked the remaining folders in her email and found nothing of interest. It was all business-related. I closed the file, logged off, and turned off the computer. Sitting back, I contemplated what to do next. I glanced at the clock and saw it was past 10, deciding that was enough for one night. 10 minutes later, I was in the guest room bed, asleep almost immediately. I did not hear Edie come home. I woke early again, but my sleep had not been restful. I had drifted off and then been awakened by a vivid dream I couldn't remember. I found myself drifting again, only to snap awake as my mind raced with thoughts. As I had the day before, I left for work before Edie got up. It was unusual for us not to have contact during the day, but yesterday had been one of those days. Today, we would both be home, and I expected we would finally have our talk. With each passing hour, I felt better prepared. It was now a matter of what I would reveal to her. I was determined to take charge of the conversation. Her days of controlling the agenda were over. Meanwhile, Edie was struggling with her own thoughts. After a night of little sleep following the theater opening, she felt exhausted. The confusion swirling in her head made it difficult to settle down. She hoped to find time to nap before Howard got home, knowing that rest would help her cope with what lay ahead. As she lay in bed that morning, Edie thought about what she needed to do. She realized she must convince Howard that she had given up any thoughts of an affair, making him believe that her previous request was just a moment of confusion. She could attribute it to the hormonal changes she had experienced after stopping her hormone replacement therapy following health scares. She had confided in Jenny about her confrontation with Howard. Jenny scolded her for being careless, fully aware of Edie's desire for a lover but disapproving of it. She warned Edie that Howard would never accept such a situation and couldn't understand why Edie would want to cheat on him. Jenny saw Howard as the perfect husband, which he truly was. But Edie found herself questioning why she felt so compelled towards self-destruction. As thoughts raced through her mind, she reflected on her past experiences with other men and recognized how much better Howard was than anyone else. She pondered what was driving her toward this precarious edge. With so many unanswered questions, she knew she wouldn't find clarity by lying in bed. It was time to shower, eat something, and prepare for the conversation ahead. By 5:30, feeling the tension in her nerves, Edie decided to make herself a strong drink to calm her. Howard arrived at his usual time, just before 6, and she waited for him in the kitchen. She had prepared one of his favorite meals, hoping to set the right mood for their conversation. As he entered, she felt unsettled despite the drink. She knew another would help when Howard poured his usual glass of wine. "Hello, Howard," she greeted him, trying to sound more confident than she felt. He used her formal name, a sign of the tension between them. "Dinner will be ready in a few minutes. Why don't you freshen up and have a glass of wine while you wait?" He nodded and headed upstairs to the bedroom. As she waited for his return, she poured herself another drink. When he came back a few minutes later, he poured himself a glass of Cabernet. "How was your day?" he asked. "Fine. Nothing unusual," she replied, lacking confidence. He could sense my tension, nodding in response as we fell into a deafening silence. I wanted to break it, to say something, anything, to fill the void. "I'm sorry I didn't see you yesterday," I finally managed. "I know you wanted to talk," he said calmly. He was composed, showing no sign of discomfort or nerves, unlike me. I was sure he could read my scrambled emotions. I busied myself with setting the table, needing something to occupy my hands. I checked the oven at least twice, wishing the timer would ring sooner. The seconds felt like minutes, and the minutes like hours. Finally, the bell rang, and I almost leaped at the oven door. We ate our meal almost in silence. I made a couple of comments about the opening night, and Howard nodded politely. He mentioned arranging a meeting with the vice president later next week, but I barely caught what it was about. I couldn't concentrate. His calm demeanor was maddening. How could he be so composed when I felt so unsettled? After we finished, We cleared the table and put the dishes in the dishwasher. It only took a few minutes to wash and dry the items that didn't belong in the machine, and soon we were done. Howard helped as always, and I waited for him to speak. I knew he recognized I was letting him take the lead. I just wanted to get this over with. "Let's go into the living room," he said at last. "I'm going to pour myself a brandy before we talk. Would you like something?" "Yes, I think I'll have a gin and tonic," I replied, moving quickly to grab a glass and the bottles. He disappeared into his study for a moment, then returned with a snifter and took a seat where he had 2 nights prior. I came back from the kitchen and sat in the chair opposite him, feeling the weight of what was about to unfold. I was anxious about the minutes ahead. Meanwhile, Howard willed himself to remain calm and collected. He could see how unsettling my behavior was, and he wanted to maintain an edge. He decided to address me formally. "Edith, I want you to listen very carefully to what I have to say. This will not be a two-way discussion. I will tell you what I want to tell you, and you will listen. If you cannot, then there is no need for us to discuss anything. I will give you a chance to speak, but not tonight. Do I make myself clear?" My eyes widened. This wasn't what I expected. I nodded my understanding. "Well then," he continued, "let me first tell you the consequences of your admission on Monday evening. First and foremost is my deep disappointment in your lack of respect for me." I felt my breath hitch, about to say something, but he held up his hand. "Stop. I don't know how I would ever have given you the idea that I would sit still while you made a fool of me. If you think my years of accommodating your whims have turned me into a pushover, you have another thing coming. I want to repeat what I said. I will not tolerate any infidelity on your part. If you choose to ignore my warning, I will divorce you, and there will be no reconciliation. Do I make myself completely understood?" He spoke forcefully, his voice underscoring his determination. "Yes, I understand," I managed to say, but he raised his hand again, reminding me of his intention to deliver rather than receive. "You have badly damaged our relationship. You have undermined the foundations of our marriage and cast doubt upon your fidelity. You have destroyed the trust that good marriages are built upon. You have brought doubt into my mind, doubt I never had before. I am not sure our marriage will survive." I saw my breath catch as his words hit hard. He continued, "I have had some time to think about what I will do now that you have created this situation. You profess to love me, and until this past Monday, I had every reason to believe you. Now, I'm not so sure." I instinctively leaned forward to contest his doubts, but the intensity of his gaze held me back, and I sank back into my chair in silence. "You tell me you would never hurt me, and yet you would humiliate me by giving yourself to another man. I can't imagine how you thought I would not feel pain from that. After all these years, I wonder if you really know me, and you have me questioning if I know you. I blame myself for not being more assertive in our marriage. I allowed your success and your social contacts to overshadow my role. That was a mistake. I am not, nor will I ever be, an afterthought in this marriage. I will accept nothing less than being treated as your equal. Edith, I have come to realize that you often think of yourself first, to the exclusion of all others, including me. Are the people you associate with really friends? Can you count on them when you truly need them? I want you to think about our old friends. Where are they? Do you ever think of them? I know the answer, of course. I have maintained contact with most of them, and I am welcome in their homes. Have you wondered why we don't entertain them anymore? Is it because they serve no useful purpose for you?" I could see the bewildered and hurt look on her face as he continued his unrelenting speech. "If this marriage is to continue, and I do mean if, there will have to be changes in your attitude. I will resume attending your social functions, and I will be treated as your husband, not as an afterthought. If you cannot do that simple thing, then there is no need for us to continue." This time, she didn't respond. I wondered if I might have gone too far with my demands. If so, so be it. We will resume inviting our true friends into our home, and you will treat them as friends. You need to re-establish your connections with these people. They were with us long before your success shone in the limelight. Have you ever thought about where I was while you attended galas and dinner parties? More often than not, I was spending pleasant hours with those friends. And here's something else to consider. It wasn't long before they stopped asking about you. I understand you have another social engagement tomorrow night, but I will not be attending it with you as I have a prior engagement myself. However, if we choose to continue as a couple, I will make sure I am available in the future. In the meantime, I want you to reflect on what I've said tonight. I don't want answers or excuses. I want you to give my next questions your full attention, and we will discuss them Friday evening. First, do you want this marriage to continue? If so, will you agree to stay committed and not get involved with any other man? If not, please say so, and I will instruct my lawyer to begin divorce proceedings immediately. It is non-negotiable. Second, you need to understand that my role in this household will change dramatically. I think you can guess that I will no longer be the accommodating husband. Finally, you will need to learn to be honest with me. That has not been the case in the past, and I want to know why. We will be having many frank discussions about us and what it will take to restore my confidence and trust in you. It may not be easy, but it is necessary. If you cannot be honest with me, then we have no basis for continuing our marriage. I sat back, mentally and physically exhausted. It felt like a battle, but I was sure Edith had endured far more than I had. I decided to go out for a walk to calm down and clear my head. Don't wait up for me. I will continue to sleep in the guest room for now. Perhaps after Friday, we can discuss other arrangements. Am I giving you enough time to respond? I asked quietly, trying to soften the tone of the meeting. Yes, I think so. I'll let you know if there's anything. Her voice trailed off. She was exhausted too, having been worn down both verbally and mentally. I had been hard on her, just as I intended. I wanted her to understand the weight of my feelings and what kind of changes she could expect moving forward. Now, let's hear the story from Edith's perspective. I was stunned into silence. I had completely underestimated Howard. He had laid down an ultimatum, and I was given no opportunity to respond. I had never seen him like this before. He challenged me to defend my actions and choose between his demands and divorce. There was no middle ground. I heard the door close as he left for his walk. I got up and moved to the kitchen, making myself another gin and tonic. It was unusual for me to have this many drinks, but tonight was an exception. I needed to calm down and make sense of what was happening to me. I felt I had lost every ounce of control I once enjoyed. Howard had taken that from me as if I had no power to stop him or his questions. Of course, I wanted to remain married to him. I felt I had no choice but to assure him that there would be no infidelity. His words had burned that thought from my mind. I had choices to make. They seemed simple right now, but I had 2 days to think about them. What did he mean by my being honest with him? I had always been honest with him, and this whole mess was a result of my desire to be open. But there was something else. He never once said that he loved me. He never mentioned his feelings toward me except for his anger and disappointment. Had I damaged what we had together? I didn't know if I could handle that. I love him. I know I do. I have wounded him, and like any injured creature, he's fighting back. But will he fight for us? I felt a knot in my stomach and put down my drink, knowing it wouldn't help. 2 days, just 2 days, to find a way to salvage nearly 30 years of love and knowing Howard, almost 27 of them married. There had to be a way to make him love me again. But how? I was exhausted. Lack of sleep and tension weighed heavily on me, making it hard to think clearly. I decided to call Jenny and arrange to meet with her. Maybe she would have some ideas. God knows I didn't. Then, I would go to bed. Meanwhile, Howard stepped outside into the warm evening air, the last light of day lingering in the sky. As he walked toward the common, he felt the fresh breeze from the river, breathing more normally now. The worst was over, or so he thought. He had said everything he wanted to say, holding back only what he didn't want to express. He had dangled hope in front of Edith, but left little room for negotiation. There was nothing pleasant about what he had just done. He had struck her with his words as if they were blows. After a while, he noticed how she absorbed his words without resistance. He should have felt better, relieved, even elated, but he didn't. He believed it was necessary to shock her into reflecting on their marriage and their future together. By Friday, he would likely know if they had any future at all. As he walked, he contemplated who he was and what he wanted. Did he want this marriage to continue? Did he still love Edie? He deliberately avoided telling her he loved her, unsure himself. It was better not to mislead her. If he had lost that love, how would he know? He remembered reading that the test for love was to imagine life without one's partner, divorce, death, or any other reason. How would he carry on? Could he get past her past mistakes and forgive her? Initially, he thought it impossible, but now he was uncertain. She couldn't change the past, nor could she make things right at this late stage. He had to confront her sin before making a decision. She needed to acknowledge the hurt she had caused him. What about this new version of himself, the more assertive Howard? He knew it was an act, and he doubted he could sustain it. Perhaps he could find a less aggressive form of himself, one that he could embrace without disliking who he was. He realized he could never return to the softer, more vulnerable man he once was. Eddie would lose respect for him, and he feared she would seek another man once again. What would it take to rekindle the excitement she craved? Nothing had changed since yesterday. He still needed to know more about her. What secrets did she hold? Had she been unfaithful? Did he truly want to know? He wondered if she understood how deeply she had shaken his faith in her. As darkness fell, he turned back toward their home, calming himself after the earlier confrontation. So many questions lingered, yet so few answers remained. He had left the decision about their future in her hands. It was ironic. He had gained control, yet Edie would ultimately decide their fate. Meanwhile, Edith finally managed to get a decent night's sleep, despite the confusion swirling in her mind. Crawling out of bed, she headed for the shower, which helped clear her head. She had called Jenny the night before. She agreed to meet for lunch at their favorite little bistro. Thank God for Jenny. At the bistro, Nick, the head waiter, greeted her at the door. "Miss Marr, Mrs. Carver is expecting you." He led her to a private corner table. "Thank you, Nick." "Hello, Jenny." "Thank you for coming," she said, genuinely relieved to see her friend. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Edie," Jenny replied with a warm smile. Jenny was solid and grounded. They had been friends for over 10 years. Howard was wrong. She did have a real friend in Jenny. She could confide in her completely. "I had my talk with Howard last night. Or should I say, he talked and I listened. He didn't want me to say anything. He said he'd give me my chance on Friday." "Oh, Jenny, he was so cold, so harsh. I've never seen him like this. He was a completely different person from before. I feel like I don't know him at all." "Tell me everything," Jenny said calmly. I shared everything I could remember, recounting his 3 final demands. By the time I finished, I was almost in tears. Jenny reached over and patted my hands. "Calm down, Eddie. Let's talk about tomorrow night," she said, her composure steadying me. "What are you going to tell him?" "I'm going to tell him I love him, that I don't want a divorce, and that I would never cheat on him. I'll explain that it was all just a bad dream and that I don't know what made me think I could hurt him like that." "What else?" "Oh, he says he wants to be with me at these functions. I don't know why exactly, but he says he wants to be treated like an equal. He used to hate my parties. I'm not sure what to think. I'll do it, of course. I just don't know what he expects. I'm happy to have him be more assertive. I want him to be my partner in everything." "Anything else?" I don't know how to address his comments about my honesty. After all, I told him what I was thinking before I did anything. Isn't that a sign of honesty? I don't know what he's referring to. "Don't you think hard, Edie? Isn't there something that you fear telling him?" Jenny looked at me with a penetrating gaze. I couldn't understand what she meant until it hit me. Oh my God, I can't tell him that. It would kill him. It would end our marriage right then. I can never tell him. Panic surged through me. What if he already knows? He can't. You're the only other person who knows. You wouldn't tell him, so how could he know? I don't know, but it's a dangerous game I'm playing. He didn't bring that subject up because he thought it might be interesting. He has something on his mind. From your description of last night, he was very specific and very prepared. He must have a reason for making it one of the big 3. Maybe he thinks I'm already having an affair. Can you take that chance? I don't think I can bring myself to tell him. It would destroy us, and then I'd have nothing. You've really messed this up, haven't you? Jenny's tone was serious, with no hint of humor. I nodded. She was right. This was entirely my fault. What am I going to do? I can't lose him. I just can't. Jenny sat back for a moment, sipping her coffee and thinking. Well, keep in mind that this advice is free, And you know what they say about advice being worth what you pay for it. There was still no hint of a smile on her face. If I were in your position, I would tell the truth. The whole truth and nothing but the truth. Don't hold anything back. You can't slip up if you do that. Second, I would seek professional help to understand why you thought you needed to have an affair. I have some experience with a psychiatrist. They may not have all the answers, but they certainly help you consider all the questions. Third, I suggest both of you seek marriage counseling. You're going to need it, no matter how that conversation goes tomorrow, if you're still together. Finally, she continued, it seems Howard has had enough of being in the background. He deserves to be an equal partner in your marriage, regardless of how much more you earn. Your income shouldn't matter unless he feels diminished by it. Howard is a remarkable man, and he needs to be treated like one. I sat listening to Jenny, concentrating on every word. She hadn't pulled any punches, and that was what I wanted. But there was one big stumbling block, telling Howard about my earlier deception to avoid getting pregnant. It was my greatest fear. I was certain Howard would react violently to any admission on my part. I was sure our marriage would end right then. Jenny, last night he never once said he loved me. Not once. Maybe it's too late. He talked as if there might be a future, but a future without love? I don't think I could live with that. Maybe it's better that he just gets rid of me. I felt overwhelmed. Every turn led to disaster. I didn't know how I could save my marriage. Don't give up, Edie. I think he still loves you, but you need to ask him. It's at the core of whatever happens between you both. If he didn't love you, why would he go through all this trouble? He could just leave. Why would he challenge you the way he has if he didn't want to salvage something from this mess? He's scrambling too. He's not as sure of himself as he sounds. He's waiting for a sign from you that you want to restore your relationship to something he can accept and enjoy. You have to give him that chance. I don't understand. I want him to give me a chance, but I don't hear anything in his voice that sounds uncertain. I'm struggling to believe what you're telling me. People don't change overnight. Edie, Howard isn't an ogre. He's hurt, angry, and trying to regain some dignity and control over something that has shocked him to the core. He's putting on a brave face, but I'm guessing he isn't as confident as he seems. He's trying to force you to admit your mistake. You've woken him up by poking him with a sharp stick, and now he's reacting. He's just as uncertain about what will happen as you are. You sound pretty sure of yourself, I replied, still grappling with her perspective. I'm not sure. I wasn't there with you when all this happened. I've been trying to listen to what you've told me and make sense of it. Remember, I've only met Howard once, briefly. He hardly knows I exist. Doesn't he? I don't know. I don't think so. Right now, Jenny, I don't know anything for certain. I was on the verge of tears again. We paused for a moment to order our lunch. Jenny doesn't drink, and I was content with just an iced tea. I needed a break from the intensity of our conversation. It was getting too complicated, and I needed to simplify things so I could handle them tomorrow. I had to return to the basics. What did I want, and what did Howard want? Keeping it simple felt essential. My greatest fear was revealing my unwillingness to have children. He was right. I had been selfish for a long time. That wasn't a good foundation for a marriage, was it? I realized I was talking as much to myself as to Jenny. I looked at my salad, noticing that I was barely touching it. My appetite matched my mood, which was nearly non-existent. Cheer up, Eddie. I know this is hard, and I know you're beating yourself up over what you've done, but what's done is done. Now it's time to decide what's important. What do you want to accomplish tomorrow? You have a great opportunity to salvage your marriage. Many women never get that. You'll have a captive audience. The stage is yours. It's all about presentation. When you know what you want to say, how you want to answer his questions, and what you want to do to make things right between you two, then you just do it. I sighed and leaned back in my chair. Jenny was right. Preparation was key. I could handle tough situations with famous people without a second thought. So why not apply the same preparation to Howard? It would take courage to do it properly, but I was beginning to feel a bit better. I looked at Jenny and nodded. She was right. I needed to hear the story from Howard's perspective. Friday was typically a low-intensity day at work, but this one felt particularly quiet, giving me time to think about Ed. When I woke up this morning, my mind was made up. I knew what I would do. Too much time spent having second thoughts left me questioning myself. Was I too hard on her? Was I pushing her beyond her ability to cope? At times, she looked terrified, as if she thought I might snap and do something extreme. Perhaps my actions had been too dramatic. What did I want from all this? What was I hoping to accomplish? I kept asking myself these questions repeatedly. I still loved her. I knew that now because I couldn't get her out of my mind. If I didn't love her, I wouldn't be obsessing over her, and I wouldn't be feeling this mix of anger and uncertainty about our future. I realized the core issue was her secret, the one she was afraid to tell me. The thought of denying us children weighed heavily on my mind. Was I angry? Yes. Could I forgive her? I didn't know. Could she bring herself to confess? That was another uncertainty. Would her admission be the determining factor in whether we stayed together? I found myself riddled with doubt. 30 years together, almost 2/3 of our lives, had been spent intertwined. I struggled to imagine life without her. It would be lonely, of course. When you've been with someone that long, conversations about your life together become unspoken. It's all imprinted on your psyche. Words aren't always necessary. Sometimes a touch, a smile, or a simple gesture suffices. The comfort of lying in bed with her nearby, even without touching, the scent, the warmth, all the intangibles of our shared life were profound. I didn't know what to expect this evening. In a way, I was dreading it. I had promised to let her have her say and to listen without comment unless she asked for it. I owed her that much. But then what? That part of my plan felt unformed. Meanwhile, Edith was home early that evening, just after 5. I didn't know whether to be worried or not. I was a bundle of nerves. This unexpected change in habit was another unsettling element. It didn't take long for me to notice something else was different. You're home early? Yes, it was quiet today, and I was able to leave just past 4, a head start on the weekend. He smiled at me as he said this, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since Monday. Would you care for a drink? The usual? He seemed relaxed, almost normal. Yes, thank you. He made my usual gin and tonic, but didn't pour himself a glass of wine. I'm going to change, he said, smiling as he headed upstairs. He was back in less than 5 minutes, wearing a new golf-style shirt, jeans, and moccasin slippers. He looked completely different, and he was smiling. You look very relaxed, Howard, I remarked, wondering if he was trying to tell me something. It's been a very stressful week for both of us. I'd like to take things down a notch. I don't want to put any more pressure on you. I know I've been hard on you, but let's enjoy dinner and talk afterwards. I nodded. Thank you. I'm a bundle of nerves. I'm so upset about what's happened, and I feel unsure of myself and what I want to say. Just be yourself. Tell me what you want to tell me. Be honest, Eddie. Be honest with me, and most importantly, be honest with yourself. He called me Eddie again. He hadn't used that name all week. Maybe things were starting to look up. But there it was again. The honesty question, the one I hadn't figured out how to handle. I had made another of his favorite meals, and he acknowledged it. We managed some conversation during dinner, which helped ease my nerves. Yet, I still dreaded what was to come. My talk with Jenny had helped, but I couldn't envision how this was all going to unfold. I didn't have a second drink. I didn't think I could keep it down. I needed all my wits about me. Alcohol would only provide false courage. Jenny had taught me that. She was a recovering alcoholic, and it had cost her dearly, her marriage and her relationship with her children. It was a steep price to pay. I admired her courage. She never blamed anyone but herself and recognized it as a sickness that she was working to overcome. I had no such excuse for my behavior. My selfishness was clear, and Howard's harsh words had jolted me into acknowledging my self-centered actions. But I could change. I knew I could. It wouldn't be hard. I just needed to be more thoughtful of others. I could do that. I would do that. Once we finished the dishes, we walked to the living room and sat where we had sat on Wednesday evening. It was my turn. How to begin? I thought, taking a deep breath. Howard, I want to start by apologizing. I'm truly sorry for hurting you and for thinking you would accept my behavior. I don't know what I was thinking. It wasn't rational. Worse, I don't even know what brought it on. It certainly wasn't you. I've never thought you were anything less than a wonderful partner and a deeply caring man. Maybe I took that for granted after all these years. Perhaps I became so accustomed to your love and support that I didn't value it as I should have. I need to find out why. You were wrong about my not having a real friend. I do have one, Virginia Martin. Jenny is my closest friend, after you, of course. She's my confidant, someone I can talk to without fear of gossip. She's been through a lot and can be honest with me. I value her advice, and I should have listened. She told me I was crazy to even think of having an affair, and that you were the perfect husband, something I should cherish above all else. She warned me that if you found out, I wouldn't be able to control the consequences. And she was right. In my confusion, I thought that if I told you what I wanted to do, you would somehow understand. I didn't want to go behind your back. I never intended to deceive you. I never wanted to humiliate or belittle you. It just didn't cross my mind. But I did, didn't I? Just telling you what I wanted was enough, wasn't it? I looked at Howard carefully, unsure of what reaction to expect. He remained calm and composed. I pushed on, feeling the weight of my words. I don't know how to express how ashamed I am of what I've done to you, and how truly sorry I am. I know an apology isn't enough. Jenny has recommended a psychiatrist who she says can help me understand why I behaved the way I did. I will call her next week to see if she will accept me as a patient. You must know by now that I will do anything to preserve our marriage. I love you with all my heart, and I can't imagine my life without you. I'm begging you to give me another chance. I will agree to anything that will keep us together. Anything. Jenny suggested marriage counseling, and I'm willing if you are. I want us to be together for the rest of our lives. That's more important to me than anything, including my career. I would give it up tomorrow if that's what you want. Nothing is more important than you in my life. I know I've been selfish, but I can change. I can be a better person. I can reconnect with our old friends. I can be more considerate of you. It won't be hard to do. I just need to remind myself to be more thoughtful of others. I paused again to collect my thoughts, watching Howard carefully. He was calm but alert, his eyes reflecting that he was absorbing everything I was saying. Howard, I want to assure you that I have never been unfaithful to you, and I never will be. I've wiped away any thought that I could do such a thing. I saw the hurt and pain I caused you, and I couldn't live with myself if I ever did that again. I paused again, hoping for some reaction from Howard, but he remained calm and unresponsive. I wondered if he believed me. I know that I haven't treated you very well, not as my partner and the most important person in my life. I think it's part of the selfishness I've succumbed to. I promise I will change. You are far too important to me not to acknowledge that to our friends and associates. Again, I can only apologize for my actions. I am ashamed of the things I've done that have diminished you and your importance in my life. You've asked me to be honest, with you and with myself. I've tried to do that today. Your words from the other night shook me to my core, and I'm still trying to recover from them. I had to try hard to understand everything I had done, not just my foolish idea of being unfaithful, but the deeper issues. It hurt to realize that Howard was right about things I hadn't wanted to confront in myself. I had tried very hard to be honest with him. I didn't know what else to say. I hadn't lied to him tonight. I had never been unfaithful, and I didn't intend to be. I admitted my failings as a wife and partner, and I knew these were things I could and had to change. If there's nothing else I can say, I will simply express that I love him. I love him with all my heart, just as I have since the day we met. That hasn't changed, and I don't think it ever could. Above all, I needed to know that he still loved me. I was at a loss for words and felt I had said everything I could think of. I had answered his questions and his demands, and there could be no doubt that I was sincere. Once again, I was exhausted. I had bottled up my emotions and let them spill out in the past few minutes. I was past tears. I wasn't typically a weeper, but now it was a matter of waiting for Howard's decision. I leaned back and looked at the quiet, composed man who was my husband. His face was in his hands, and when he removed them, I saw the tears, quiet, unrestrained tears trickling down his cheeks. He looked at me with a forlorn expression that I had never seen before. I'm sorry, Eddie. I believe you. I believe you have been faithful. I believe you want to change. I believe you love me, and I believe you are ashamed of what you've done to us. I believe all of that, but I don't believe you have been completely honest. I gasped in shock. What did he mean? I saw him react to my expression. There's something you've been hiding from me for a long time. Something that has hurt me more than I ever realized I could be hurt. Something you could not bring yourself to tell me, no matter how much you wanted to. Do you know what it is? I nodded, and he continued. How do I know? I don't, but I can feel it. You've denied me our family, our children, even our grandchildren. You knew how important that was to me. You knew it was something we both wanted in our lives. Yet somehow you changed your mind. I might have gotten past this if you had been honest and admitted it, even at this late date. I might have been able to forgive you. But you just couldn't bring yourself to tell me, could you? I will instruct my lawyer to draw up the papers on Monday, he said. I'll move my things while you are out of the house next week. I'll take a few clothes with me tonight and stay at a hotel. I'll let you know which one in case of emergencies. I thought you would want to know that I'll be taking a buyout from TCN. They are downsizing while times are tough, and they've offered me a very fair settlement to leave early. In a few months, when I am settled, I'll probably start my own business. I still have a lot of useful years left, and I'll keep myself busy. I'm sorry, Eddie. I had really hoped you could find the courage to tell me your darkest secret. I'm sorry you couldn't. I wish you well. I watched him stand, the tracks of tears still visible on his face as he slowly walked out of the room and upstairs. I felt paralyzed, unable to move or speak. I wanted to scream at him to stay, to keep me safe, to hold me and love me again. But instead, I did nothing. I sat staring at the empty chair where he had been sitting, as empty as my life felt now. Meanwhile, Howard found relief in not being pressured to find work and reshape his life right away. He needed time to recover from the week that had unraveled his universe. He found a nice small apartment in Cambridge that suited his needs perfectly. He bought furniture in colors he liked and settled in. Wanting to escape, he took a vacation. Somewhere Eddie and he hadn't been to, a place without memories. It was May, and he chose the south of France. He rented a car and drove from Monaco to Narbonne, from Marseille to Orange, absorbing the surroundings, the people, and the wonderful cuisine. For a time, he felt happy. Sitting in a seaside cafe in Saint-Maxime, he wondered if he could live there. He didn't need much. He could run his business remotely if necessary. Perhaps living among the French would help him forget. But for now, he decided to return to Boston and think it over some more. He was still trying to get used to being lonely. Now, let's hear the story from Edith's perspective. Jenny took me away from the chaos of my failed marriage. I was a mess. I couldn't work or think. I just went through the motions of living. Jenny took me to Seattle and on an Alaskan cruise. It was the isolation and escape I needed. Thank God for Jenny. She has been my anchor these past weeks. My business seems to run itself. I have very good help. I'm sure my absence has been noticed at various social functions, but with my divorce being public, I suppose they'll understand. Neither Jenny nor I need to work anymore. Both of us have accumulated enough to last us much longer than we will live. I've never been one to spend recklessly. I had to fight with Howard's lawyer to get him to accept a larger settlement from me. He deserved at least that, and yet he wanted so little. I don't think there will be another man in my life. I just can't bring myself to replace him. If there ever is, I will know not to do the things to him that I did to Howard. No matter what, I'll be lonely. I'll have Jenny and all my friends from the business, but I won't have Howard. There will never be another Howard. There was only ever one of him. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.